Accounting practice problem. Create accounting worksheet part number 10. Get ready, because we're about to excel with Excel. Here we are in our Excel worksheet. In prior presentations, we put this together from a blank sheet. We're going to be continuing on here. If you have access to this Excel workbook, there's going to be 2 tabs on down below, example and practice. The example in essence being the answer key. Let's take a look at it now. Go into the example tab. All the way on the left-hand side, we started out by entering the information where we're going to put the transactions, the debits and credits for the journal entries for the financial transactions, creating the trial balance, then the general ledger, the huge general ledger. Then we had the subsidiary ledgers for accounts receivable and accounts payable. Then for inventory. Then we had the balance sheet, finally looking at the financial statement we put together. I like to put the balance sheet together first if I can. If I have a structure of a trial balance which allows me to do so, allowing me to work from top to bottom on the trial balance, which is a little bit backwards if you think about most or look at most like accounting textbooks that tell you have to do the income statement first. But we did the balance sheet first, and now we're going to do the income statement this time, and then we'll do the statement of equity. Let's go back to the practice tab on the left-hand side and see what we have thus far. If we go to the left, we have some hidden cells. So what I'm going to do is unhide the cells first to get a handle on what the worksheet looks like, and then I'm going to rehide the cells so that we can have the data input right next to the trial balance. Putting my cursor on column I, and I'm going to go on over to BZ, let go, right click on that selected area. It's not letting me right click on the selected area and unhide those cells. And then I'm going to go all the way to the right just to make sure we got the same data so I can acclimate myself as to where we are at this point in time. Going all the way to the right, we've got then there's our balance sheet. I'm going to be starting work in this column. I want to make that the new skinny column. So I'm going to put my cursor on CF, and then I'm going to go all the way back to the trial balance so that I have the trial balance side by side. We're going to hide all these columns. All these columns need to be hidden. Going to hide them all. We're going to go all the way back, and I'm going to even take that skinny J column, right click there and hide all that stuff. And then there we have it. So now we've got our trial balance. Also note that we hid the beginning and enter trial balance. So if I, in other words, go from F to I and unhide. Whoops, I went the wrong way. I'm going to undo that, and I want to unhide that stuff. Unhide. Then we got the beginning trial balance, the entries, and the ending trial balance. I want to take this information from the ending trial balance so that it updates every time we enter a transaction. To not get confused, I'm going to hide the beginning and the entries columns. So I'm going to put my cursor on column J, drag on over to column H, right click and hide those columns. You have it. Now we're going to make the income statement, which is basically the different colored blue stuff down here. And notice again how easy this is if you have a trial balance that's in Excel in this format, because basically the net income can just be calculated as the incomes, which are credit balances, and then you could just sum up the expenses, which are debits, credits negative for this format, and the debits positive. You get the net income 24,710. There it is calculated right there. Confusing part being, however, most people saying, hey, does that mean it's a loss there? No, it's not a loss, because on this trial balance, we're thinking in terms of debits and credits. The credits actually being good when we're thinking about the income statement, debits being good in essence when we're thinking about the balance sheet. In other words, debits and credits are not inherently good or bad. They're just two sides of the ledger, which happen, some accounts that we like happen to have debit or credit balances, and others debit or credit balances. So on the income side, we like the sales side, which is a credit. On the balance sheet, we like the checking or the assets, which are debit balances. So in any case, that's the thing that we gotta convert from a debit and credit system to a plus and minus system. So now I'm going to go over here and just say, all right, let's just recreate this. I'm going to make this our skinny cell, making that our skinny cell. Income statement. The income statement, by the way, is usually the longest statement, but it's also usually the one that's kind of the most easy when you break it down to its simplest form, which we might call a single step income statement. In that instance, just simply breaking down the revenue minus the expenses, just having those two big categories. However, You might have a lot of subcategories, which we might call, say, a multi-step income statement, where we want to have some subcategories along the way. Revenue minus a big category like cost of goods sold, minus possibly other big categories like administrative expenses and so on, and then the total operating expenses. So we might have different categories along the way, and that is more likely to happen if we're going from a service business, which is more likely to have a more simple single-step income statement, to a manufacturing or a business that has inventory, due to the fact that you're then going to have cost of goods sold. You might have further kind of segregations or separations of accounts and sub-accounts when you get a larger type of business, breaking things out by division and so on. So in any case, we're going to have the income statement. I'm gonna make that black and just to show that it's the header. We'll go back and format it again at the end. Go into the home page, font group, drop down on the bucket, making it black and white. Then we're gonna have the income accounts. I'm just gonna draw these over from our information on the trial balance. I'm just gonna say that equals. Then actually first, let's put a subcategory of revenue. And so I'm going to put my revenue accounts under the revenue. I'm going to make this subcategory the blue and blue by going to the font group and making it, I think it's that blue that we used, or did we use this blue for this one? We're going to make it that blue, and then we'll make it this blue, which I think we might have used this one here. Let's do that. That looks right, I believe. That matches, doesn't it? I think so. Let's make this a little bit larger now. We're going to make this whole cell a bit larger. Then we're going to pick up our revenue accounts. Normally there's going to be less revenue accounts than expense accounts because we're specializing in what we do. So we only have one revenue account in this case, which is not unusual. And then we're going to have a whole lot of expense accounts because we do what we do and we pay for everything else for something else. Therefore, a lot of categories of a variety of things we pay for, and only one thing that we actually specialize in and do. But hopefully that specialization in what we do generates more money coming in than what we're paying for to get it done going out. Now this one is going to be a credit balance. We don't want the credit on our statement. We're converting it from a debit and credit system to a plus and minus system. Therefore, I'm going to put this in the outside. I'm going to skip a column because I don't have any subcategorization because we only have one account. So I'm going to put that directly in the outer column. I'm going to say negative instead of equals so that I flip the sign, picking up that 200,000. So next we've got cost of goods sold. Costs of goods sold. This we're going to say is another subcategory, which is often a huge subcategory for inventory companies that have inventory, because the relationship of the cost of the goods that they sell, the inventory that they're selling, and the sales item is such a huge relationship that we want to have a subcategory on the way down to net income. Still just simply an expense account, but super important expense account for those types of businesses. Therefore, we're going to make it its own little subcategory. I'm going to select these items and format paint it and just paintbrush that right there. So we have that subcategory. And then I'm going to say that this equals the cost sold. If you're a merchandising company, you might only have one of goods sold account. If you're like a construction company or something, you might have multiple accounts. If you have a job cost system, that would be using the cost of goods sold accounts. But we'll keep the one account here for now, cost of goods sold. I'm going to put that in the outer column too, meaning I don't have multiple accounts. Therefore, I don't need something in the inner column that I'm going to add up and sum up to the outer column. This just equaling the cost of goods sold. Then we'll typically have a subcategory, which is going to be called gross profit. So we're going to say gross profit, and I'm going to underline this one. I'm going to say underline this one. And then I might put some indentations here. This is a personal preference to see that, to kind of emphasize that gross profit, which I'm going to subtract on down. You also could put this gross profit on another category outside in order to emphasize the fact that you're basically making another subcategory with this gross profit, but I'm going to put it inside here. This is going to be equal to the sales minus the cost of goods sold. That relationship, big, important relationship, and it's going on the way down to the net income number. So net income number is going to take this subcategory, subtract out all the rest of the expenses, which I'm going to call operating expenses. Operating expenses. Operating expenses sometimes are going to be broken down further into selling and administrative expenses, trying to break out the sales process versus the admin process. I'm going to group them all together here, making it a little bit more simplified than a more structured multi-step statement. And so that's going to be dependent on just what kind of company you're in and how much detail you want in the financial. So I'm going to say this is going to be equal to the insurance, and I'm just going to copy the rest of them down as we go. So you might be asking, is there any particular order that the expenses need to be in? And the answer is no, really there's not, but oftentimes there's going to be in order of relevance. So one common type of way you might populate these is going to be from the most expensive or the highest dollar amount one down to the lowest dollar amount one. So that's one way that you might group these. Oftentimes they'll be grouped when you enter this stuff into, say, an accounting software system, or when you create trial balance. You're oftentimes going to be trying to group these accounts in a way that you think is logical to you. If you don't have any other grouping system and you use a database program, then it would simply group these basically in alphabetical order, which might not be the best way to do it. You might be saying, hey, I'd like the big ones up top. Maybe you like payroll up top because that's going to be my highest dollar amount, for example. And in that instance, usually you would use account numbers to help you to realign and put the biggest items up top within a particular category. So we're not going to talk about account numbers right now. We might do that in a future problem that just focuses on account numbers and how you might want to think about those in general. So we're going to then take these items. Now, you could also say, is there a way that I can use my autofill? I basically said equal to each one of them. I could then take that first one and then use my autofill and copy that on down. Just autofill it on down, fill handle, and there we go. So there we have that. That would be faster. We can also go to the Home tab now, Alignment and Indent. So now we've got our category, subcategory indicated by the colon. We indented it, indicating the fact that these are within the subcategory. We're going to pull these into the inner column now and then sum them up in the outer column. So I'm just going to say this equals, because they're debits now, which are positive numbers for us, the 160. And I can simply copy this formula down or autofill it down. And there we have it. And that populates for us nice and easy. And so then there's something wrong here, though. This is the insurance. I skipped one somewhere. This is the insurance expense. Oh, I see what I did. I picked up the cost of goods sold. Hold on a second. This is going to be equal to the 1600. And then we can copy that down. And that looks better. That looks way more better. Okay. So then we're going to go to the font group and underline it here. And we'll call this then total operating expenses. Completing our subcategorization here equals the SUM of the column that's inside. I'm going to indent this 2 times now by going to the alignment group, indent, underline here in the 15290, font group and underline, and that'll finally get us to the net income number, which will simply be the last subtotal, which is in the outer column, the 40,000 minus the 15.2, the operating expenses, getting us to that 24,007, which we could check with this number down here. So note the formatting of this, and also just realize that we're always going to do something when you use this kind of formatting. If you're breaking down anything like an algebraic problem, you generally want to set it up in so that you're not doing calculations that are going to be in multiple columns. Note that this calculation, for example, had something above it, so I'm only going to be using these items above it. I'm not generally going to be jumping from column to column when I sum things up. This one's in the inner column. The next calculation is on the right. Therefore, I'm only going to be doing something with this inner column. I'm not going to be doing something with this column and then jumping over to that 40,000, one column at a time, in other words. This one down here is now taking these items in the outer column. It's not going to be taking these items in this column and jumping to the column to the left. That's generally how the system's going to work, one column at a time as you basically do your sub calculations. So there's our net income. And notice how nice and easy it is to check our net income over here to this net income if you had a trial balance that was in 2 columns. And if it was on a sheet of paper, for example, then you'd have to add up all the debits and you'd have to subtract it from the credit of the sales to get to that net income number. If you had this in Excel in 2 columns, but they didn't have the debits and credits as negatives and positives, you'd have to do a bit more complicated formula, subtracting those 2 out in order to pick up that proper number as well. So if you're able to, this is a pretty efficient way, I think most efficient way, to put the information into Excel and then use that information to create financial statements very easily with the most simplified formulas possible. So let's do some formatting now. Let's go ahead and format it. I'm going to put my cursor here, going to go to the clipboard, homepage, clipboard format, paint it on over. Let's do that here, clipboard format, paint that on over. Do that here, clipboard, paint that on over. And then we'll do our blue and border, selecting these items. We're going to go to the font group, blue borders. We're going to make it borders and blue, which is that blue. If you don't have that blue, it's in the more colors. This is what the Excel is Fun guy taught me. It's that blue right there. That's the one. Have to use that blue. It's the best. And then we're going to take these items here and we're going to do that again here. We're going to go to the home page, font group, borders and blue there as well. We could put the double underline under this one. That'd be nice. Font group, double underline. Whew, that's where the bottom number is. What's the bottom line? It's right there with the double underline. We can then check the spelling by going to the spell checker thing. And that one I'm going to ignore that one. And then are there any more? No. Of course, spell check says I know how to spell. Okay, so then let's unhide just to finish this thing up. Putting my cursor from column F, dragging on all the way over to CF. I'm going to unhide all the columns in there, right-clicking there, unhide. And then if I go all the way to the right, and we can check this out, check it out. So now we have the income statement. And remember, the income statement is part of the equity calculation here. So now now we're going to do the next one, which is the statement of equity, which will give us a better understanding of how to get from the income statement to equity. You could do that just at the bottom of the income statement if it's something simple like this, meaning I could just put beginning equity here. But I'm going to do it another statement for the equity just so you can see how that ties it in. And the statement of equity will tie in the income statement to the balance sheet. If you use something like a QuickBooks software, oftentimes they try to kind of tie in the income statement at the bottom of the balance sheet to show us how it's tied together. Or again, if it's a simplified system here, then we might be able to just do a quick calculation and kind of tie the two together. Actually, in QuickBooks, they tie it together in the equity section over here. They try to basically add the income line item to show you how they're kind of related. But another form, statement of equity, I think is the way to go. So we'll make another form next time, tying these two statements together, get a better understanding of the double entry accounting system that way.